Brett Hornig, welcome back to the Single Truck Podcast.
Hey Finn, how's it going?
It's going good, and I got to say, this type of episode that we do, I guess we're calling it the Long Run Archives at the moment. It got the first one that we did about a month ago. We'll link to it in the show notes. It got pretty solid reception. I think it's a relatively unique format here in the trail running media space. So we're doubling down. We're doing episode 2, and we got a pretty exciting lineup of topics here. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's always something to be said in the running world, whether it actually matters or not. There's always something to be said.
So the first thing we got here is we're going to have a little bit of a debate, and maybe it's not a debate. Maybe we both agree on this, but the topic is how do we make it easier and more substantive to analyze races in our sport, like Western States and Hard Rock and UTMB. And I think I'll lead off with a little bit of a tangent because I've been thinking about this for quite some time. One thing I've been thinking about a lot, really, since I've been in the sport, is how race commentators and analysts have very few resources at their disposal to say anything substantive about particular athletes and race outcomes and whatnot. When you typically read an article or you listen to a podcast or you watch a video about pre-race or in-race or post-race analysis, I think we'd all agree it's a lot of surface level commentary, mostly name dropping. For example, I know this person, they've done well in the past, and therefore they're in a good position to do well at this coming race. And there can also be some talk about the demands of the course too, and I think I'm glossing over a lot of other small details. And this is no fault of anybody in our sport. Like the people that we have that do this stuff, they've set a standard. It's excellent. But what I'm saying is they don't have many tools at their disposal to go beyond that type of discussion. So I think maybe I'll throw this to you. How can we make the race analysis experience better for both the commentator and the fan?
So yeah, the very first thing that immediately comes to mind that there's definitely still like a disconnect between like the track, road side of the world and trail and ultra is most major races in track and road racing. The race itself will publish an elite field, multiple weeks or months before the race. So like I know who's racing the Boston Marathon. I don't have to comb through the 30,000 people who are entered in the race. Like they have separated who they believe is the elite field. And, I know for something like Boston, there's going to be an entire elite start. But I mean, at a very minimum, it would be awesome if each of these, more competitive races could just publish their own elite fields before the race starts. That gives at least people trying to, make their predictions for the race or, just build a little bit of hype about who's doing what. Like then we at least have a more up-to-date list of names. And Ultra Signup does a decent job at that kind of organically with their percentage ranking system. It's not perfect, but I think at the moment it's the best we have, assuming the race is using Ultra Signup to publish the entrance lists and have the signups actually be on their site.
How about like analytics? Like I think you and I are both fans of other sports like football and baseball in particular. You have some really crazy stats out there that announcers can call upon to analyze performance. I mean, one of my favorite stats is like slugging percentage for offensive players in baseball or wins over replacement to judge how valuable a player is. And it doesn't seem like we have that much data at our disposal, or it's been hard to aggregate data off platforms like Strava. So if you're looking at like the X's and O's of a race, and given that you're a coach and you have this experience, how would you want to see this done?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, with something like baseball or even football, I mean, if one game is the equivalent to one race, you get a much bigger sample size, versus like someone who's been doing ultras for 3 or 4 years, they might have 10 results to their name. Like it's hard to draw, something big, which is why we get a lot of the like, oh, so-and-so ran a really good 50K 2 years ago. I haven't seen any results, but it would be foolish of me, to count them out on winning. It's like, but that's like purely speculatory based off of something they did super long ago. Gosh, where was I even going with this? Oh, yeah. So, I mean, it would be really cool to know, even if it's just a matter of like getting a little dive into a personal statement from them, the athlete, or maybe their coach. How is their training going? Like, did they do anything different between their last good race and now? Like, is it similar? Like, how, just maybe even just let them build their own hype. I mean, that's good for them. I know a lot of people like to go in to the race like as like the dark horse, totally undiscovered, flying under the radar. But that's really boring for every day but the race. There needs to be a better way to kind of give a little bit more like numerical evidence as to why I think so and so is going to win. It's like, oh, I put in the best training block of my life. I did a little training camp, like altitude stint up in Flagstaff for 3 weeks, and it was the best running I've ever done. Like, just hearing something like that is worth talking about. I think that's something that the race directors could, they could help contribute to that with, like we had talked about a little bit earlier, like a section for media people, analysts to be able to pull from, whatever it is, like Revifa's vault of elite athlete, data.
I think it'd be interesting if, and I've actually seriously considered building this with some of my developer friends, but basically a landing page that has this really long form, and you recruit maybe the top 50 male and female athletes for a particular race to that page, and you have them fill out these forms, and it asks questions like, are you going for a golden ticket at this race? Can you link to your Strava file? Can you link to your Instagram? Can you link to your Twitter, your YouTube? Who is your coach? How long have you been in the sport? What's your philosophy on training? Have you been injured? Are you feeling strong? Has there been like uninterrupted stretches of training? I think, and there would be much more detailed questions than that, but basically, if you get all of those athletes filling in that data and submitting it, this theoretical website can be a place for both fans and commentators to go to and to call upon pre-race, in-race, post-race to say, if they see one of these runners out in the lead and they, passed Robinson flat at Western States, they can say, maybe to the uneducated onlooker, they look like they're going too fast, but actually I'm referencing this form here, and I just called up their Strava and their past race results and what their coach has said about stuff. And it turns out that like they're right on point right now. And actually I can tell you, this is how they're going to win the race or get a top 10, because again, they provided us all this data that shows they've been preparing for this pace and this moment for whatever it is, 6 months to a year.
Yeah, exactly. Like, had they, them or their coach written out like, oh yeah, best case scenario, this is their split through X, Y, and Z parts on the course. We at least have some reference points as well. Like, announcers of any major marathon, they know how fast the rabbits are going. Like, they know how fast the race is supposed to be. Whether they do a good job of like commentating on it in the moment, that's on them. But they at least know, like, they're supposed to hit the 10K mark in this time. They're supposed to hit the halfway mark in this time. Those are all huge unknowns for every race. And I understand in most trail races, there's more variables that are going to affect that sort of pace. But, even a week out, you're going to know more or less like how much faster or slower from a regular year, the race is going to end up being. And like that would just make previewing these races, so much more, just exciting and, I don't know, like realistic.
Well, and I think that the data is going to compound on itself too. Like if we start getting multiple form fill-outs race after race, year after year, we can start using all of that data to make really interesting after the fact analyses about what's going on. Like if we get 4 years of data on the top athletes heading into Western States, for example, we can start to say, oh, this person is coached by that athlete. And if I look back at the last 4 years of data, 82% of athletes coached by that athlete or that coach, they tend to finish the race. And oh, by the way, they tend to finish in the top 10. Like they're smart racers because of this philosophy. I'm just spitballing. Like it could be any type of
Yeah.
data point, but it'll just be interesting to be able to make projections based on all of that data too.
Yeah. And I don't think it would be like pulling teeth to ask elite athletes to submit things like this. Like if I'm going to let you into my race, and I'm probably going to let you in for free, maybe bypass a lottery or some sort of qualifier or anything, the least you could do is fill out my form that takes like 15 or 20 minutes, to give me some useful information to not only make, the lead up to the race that I'm putting on more exciting, but also it's going to benefit the athletes as well.
The last thing I'll say is I got all the love in the world for our ultra running media, and this is no criticism on it. I'm just talking about the future. We're just talking about the future, and I think that the outcome of this is what can we do from a tool standpoint, from a data standpoint, so that they have more things to talk about before, during, and after the race.
Yeah, we have the technology, Finn. And there's a couple races that are already starting to do this. Like everybody who runs Broken Arrow, I know the 52K for sure, and I think the 26K as well. Before the race, a week or two out, you get sent a Google form to fill out that is just has some, bit like, who are you? Where are you from? Who do you want to thank for having helped get you to this point? And it's just for Eric Schranz, who's usually calling all the race finishers in. It's so he has something that's, personable and relevant, as opposed to just saying like, all right, and around the corner we have bib 746. Congrats, runner. Like that's just not that exciting. But knowing their name and having them have written in like, I'd like to thank my cat, Charlie, for helping with all the recovery. That's more fun.
Yeah, it's more fun. And like, I just think it creates more opportunities for us to be fans, and it's just more content, which I think is great. And anyways, what's your hot take for the week?
What do I have? Let me pull up my notes page. I've got some. My hot take was, I think, a similar hot take to you, and it was just various rebuttals to what I think you were going to say.
Should I lead then?
Regarding DNFs.
Oh, okay. I'll start.
Which, I know, it's a touchy subject. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So I've been a broken record about this for about 10 days, but my hot take for this episode is that DNFs, especially if you're an elite athlete or you consider yourself to be an elite athlete, DNFs should affect negatively your ITRA and UTMB scores. The reason being is when you have a certain ITRA score and a certain UTMB score, you get certain privileges in our sport. You get to skip lotteries. You get automatic entries into the most sought after and applied for races across the world. And there's a perverse incentive, in my opinion, to maintain that score once you've achieved it so that you have that privilege forever, essentially. And I think a lot of athletes, I shouldn't say that I think that they're doing this with intention, but it certainly benefits them to DNF races when it's not going well for them, if they're not in that position to win or to podium or to be in a top 10. And what sucks is if you're an athlete who it isn't your day, but for whatever reason, maybe it's out of principle or you're just stubborn, you finish the race and maybe you get 25th or you get 100th or last place, you're going to be penalized effectively. Like your ITRA score is going to drop, maybe to the point where you lose that privilege of bypassing lotteries and being on those start lines for races like UTMB and Western States. So I think we got to change that. And I will say one thing before I give it back to you. And I've heard people say, well, we don't want to encourage a culture of like pushing through injuries and stuff like that. Again, this would be a great data point because I don't think we have it. I seriously doubt that even the vast majority of DNFs in our sport are due to injury. I think it's due to a loss of will to continue. It's all mental. So I will give it back to you. Maybe we can have a nice little back and forth here. But this gets me so angry because, I'll give you an example. Like I got into CCC last year because I had a certain ITRA score. And it wasn't my best day. I finished like 100th place, and that knocked my ITRA score down like 15 points. And I had to go through the lottery this year for CCC, and I didn't get picked. So like I got penalized for finishing CCC.
Yeah, that's super tricky. I definitely have gone back and forth on this because like there's definitely some points that I agree with and some that I don't so much. And maybe part of it is something that can't quite carry over exactly from the road running side of the world, because there isn't quite a ranking system quite like that gets you into races. A lot of it's just agents hyping up their runners and being like, this is what you do. But in a lot of cases, for those races, they won't get paid an amount that maybe that they were promised if they don't finish. There's appearance fees, but there's also finisher fees as well. That's just something that doesn't exist yet in trail running. Like maybe our sport does get to a point where some of the top athletes in the world are offered X amount of dollars to go do the race. Maybe it's not so much to go, maybe it's to go finish the race at a minimum, or else you don't get paid. But yeah, I think the big question is like, how much should a DNF affect your ITRA score? Because, is it, if you drop out, you're automatically one spot below last place in the race? I think that's too much of a penalty, because even if someone drops out halfway through and then they walk the other half, they're probably actually not going to finish dead last, that person. So then it's like, where do you draw the line for this penalty? Does it have something to do? The smaller the race field relative to the number of applicants, does that increase your penalty for dropping out? Like if you drop out of Western States or Hard Rock and there's 8 gazillion people who want to do the race and only 363 spots, do you get penalized more? I was thinking about things like that. It's like maybe it depends on the race that affects your dropout score. I don't think it should be so much to the point where, it forces someone to walk in like 7 or 8 hours. Like I believe that there's definitely races where that's going to happen. Like I knew that the first time I ever ran Western States, I'm going to finish that at all costs, whether that's, coming in right under 30 hours, or they're going to have to drag me off the course. Like that was one of those races where I'm like, I'm going to do it at all costs. Like, and there's been a couple opportunities like that, but there's others, like looking at it from the mindset of like a professional ultra athlete. I can see where, when your job essentially is to win races and you go to a big race and like your training's been going pretty well. I mean, there's just more unknowns in this sport in regards to the longer races. Like, it's a 14-hour race, and after 7 hours, you're like, I'm not going to win. I'm not going to get in the top 5. Like, that sucks. I also have another race coming up in a couple months that's equally as important. Do I jog this in? And no, I'm not going to get injured, but it's going to delay my recovery process by a couple more weeks or another month. Now it's starting to snowball. Now my training block's not going to be as good for the next race. And like winning races and stuff like that's going to pay the bills. That's kind of where I see from the like professional side of things, where, dropping out of some races, makes sense to me. If you're just dropping out because you're not competitive, or, you're turning into a full head case and you just simply don't believe in yourself anymore, like you need to go see a sports psychologist, because like that's where you're going to get the most benefit. But like there's situations where I like totally understand dropping out of a race from like a financial or performance standpoint for some of these elite athletes.
I 1,000,000% agree with that, especially if you're an elite athlete, especially if you're being compensated largely based off of where you finish in a race. I think it makes total sense to drop out if the way things are developing in the race, you have no shot at reaching that goal. Like And I should also say, I don't think DNFs are a bad thing. I've DNF'd like 3 or 4 races in my life, and I think it's totally fine. Like, you shouldn't, this is elective suffering. Like, you shouldn't feel compelled to finish a race. It's not life or death. Do what you need to do. I'm just saying, like, from an institutional standpoint, I think we got to change the reward system, like, because there are some up and coming athletes that could otherwise get those spots in races, and they are finishing and they're being consistent. But at the same time, like, I don't think any less of Jared Hazen because he DNFs half his races. Like, I still got mad respect for him running the second fastest time ever at Western States. And like, he probably has to DNF a bunch because he has contractual obligations to, get third place 5 times a year. And like, I do believe in taking a ton of shots on goal. So it just comes down to like the institutional part and like blocking access to people that finish stuff.
Yeah. And I guess that's one of the things that we don't really know either. I mean, I would have to look at a ton of contracts, which I don't think it's actually legal for any of these athletes to just like show me their professional contract. But like, I don't know what contractually you have to do as a Hoka athlete or a Solomon athlete or a Nike Trail athlete, whether it's, usually there's minimums for how many times you need to race a year. Usually it's do one of our sponsored events, but, I don't know if there's you have to finish this many races or like your, finisher percentage has to be this, if you have to, win 3 races a year and start 5, it's like, okay, I can drop out of 2 if I'm not going to win. And like, maybe that's something that hopefully will get fixed on the internal side of things with athlete contracts and, taking care of the athletes in the best way. It seems like the sport of trail and ultra is actually doing a pretty solid job of that, just as they're growing. But I think it could definitely always be better.
Yeah. Let's maybe we talk about the Strava find of the week. I think you got a good one.
Yeah, this one's been sitting in the back of my brain for a while, and sometimes it disappears and sometimes it comes back. And between the first episode that we did and this one, it hit me and I was like, oh yeah, this is the one. And I just like it so much. And I don't know how many people know it exists, but we're going back to 2018 in the summer leading up to Western States. And Kyle Pitari, who has gotten in the top 10 a handful of times, he's always been known for finishing pretty hard and then throwing up into a trash can on the track. In his training for the 2018 Western States, he sought out in Colorado the steepest dirt road that was at least a mile long so he could race a mile all out down it. Now, whether this is actually beneficial for Western States training, like, that's definitely up for debate. But Kyle found a dirt county road in Colorado that was at least a mile long. He measured out a mile and he flew down it as fast as he could. Finn, do you know how fast he ran?
Well, yes, I do. I do.
Kyle ran just under 3:46 for a full mile. He ran 3:45 and change. For reference, the American record in the mile on the track set by Alan Webb is 3:46.9. Like, this was downhill, but this was also someone training for 100-mile, was able to make their legs move that fast without eating it. I'm going to share my screen here so I can show you the Strava file. And for those listening, I will do my best to just describe it out. So it's a downhill mile. The mile dropped 712 feet, which I would argue that that's actually too steep for an ideal downhill mile. It goes from over 8,200 feet down to just below 7,600. So I can only imagine what Kyle's heart rate was during this time. I mean, it must have just been through the roof. And he mentioned that he's never going to do this ever again. But yeah, Finn, what do you think about this? What do you think about a downhill 3:45 mile in relation to Western States training.
Well, I want to know what the upper limits of a downhill mile PR are for people in our sport. The first thing that comes to mind is like, is Kyle Pietari uh, the most suited elite athlete in our sport to give this a go? Is this like a good benchmark for us to consider great, or are there people like Walmsley or Hayden Hawks or uh, and then on the women's side like a Claire Gallagher or Camille Herron? Like what? I guess I'd have to throw it back to you, like as a coach, like what are the upper limits of a downhill mile at this grade and at this altitude for other elites in our sport?
I mean, I can't imagine this is the fastest that someone could go because running's never been like that. I mean, I guess at the moment, every world record is the fastest anyone's ever gone, but those are all meant to be broken. And I'm not showing this Strava segment as a call out for everyone to go race a downhill mile as fast as they can. But if they do, send it our way because 3:45 is the mark right now. And the other question
Please
that
do.
I have,
Please do.
no professional like road or track person is like going to try something like this. So my question is, has anyone run a mile faster than Kyle has? I actually don't know. Like I'll have to look way back when I was in like high school. David Torrance, when he was running for Berkeley, he threw up a thread on Let's Run saying, I'm going to run a downhill mile and I'm going to try and break the world record of 3:43. I'll have to actually check on that thread to see if he did it or not, because that might be the fastest mile covered on foot. But I'll do a little more digging, and if I find anything more. But so far, this is the fastest mile I've ever seen on Strava.
And weren't you telling me offline that this may have somehow served him well at Western States?
Yes. So Western States happens, and Kyle's hovering in the top 10. Finn's phone is ringing. Don't worry, I'll wait.
What is this?
Is this your new fancy schmancy flip
Oh
phone?
my gosh, dude! It is it's the old. We're keeping this all in. This is the old.
Well,
This is the new Nokia phone.
so in true I own a flip phone fashion, it was not silenced and it went off with your super old ass ringtone. Nice.
That might be a whole nother discussion for another episode. But yes, I did. Breaking news: I did turn in my smartphone about a week ago for a flip phone, and I thought I was getting the best of every world, and it turns out that this thing can interrupt podcast recordings. So here we are.
Wow.
But
That's
anyways, you were saying that this
okay.
may have
So
served Kyle well at Western.
yeah, so I actually did find deep within the Western States site, there's a section that's called like Geeks Only, and in there you can find all the splits for the last few years. Anyone running Western States, it's actually super valuable. There's spreadsheets, there's like Excel and Google Sheets that you can download from every single person, and every single recorded split through the aid stations are all up there in public. So you can see like if so-and-so ran a really smart race, go look at their splits, go see what they ran. But at the top of Roby Point, which is mile 99 and a quarter, 99 and a half, Kyle Pietari and Cody Reed were together for 7th and 8th place. They came over Roby Point. They came through that aid station in 16:45 and 21 seconds. If there was anything that I had learned before that race, it's that I did not want to be with Kyle. No one should want to be next to Kyle at the end of a 100-mile. So I actually found Roby Point to Placer Track, the Strava segment from that, which Kyle overlapped on that 2018 race, and it's very fast. It's so impressive, and now it leads me to believe that bit of downhill training actually did something. So from Roby Point to Placer Track, it's like a third uphill, a third flat, and a third downhill. And at the very end of a 100-mile, Kyle did it at 6:49 pace, with some of his last sections being well under 6 minute pace. And then Kyle's last bit on the track was around 5:20 pace. And he did outkick Cody, who is also a very strong finisher. But Kyle, clearly had something in the back of his brain that just knew, oh yes, I've gone this fast before. I can do this. This is what I was born for.
So for the folks that are not watching this on YouTube, I mean, if you pull back up that segment, Kyle Pietari in the last mile of a 100-mile race got the third fastest time on that segment.
Yeah, and that's the fastest that anyone has done it in Western states.
And then also impressively against Cody Reed, who he's known for these pretty epic finishes at races, especially when there's like multiple runners involved and there's a lot on the line.
Yes. Yeah. Cody, I had the pleasure of racing against Cody in high school. And yeah, there's this great picture that's probably hanging up at his high school. It was some championship meet, and it was for like one of the last qualifying spots for state or league finals or whatever. And he is completely horizontal, just full Superman dive across the finish line, because if that's what it takes to beat one more person, he's always been that person to do it, which, I admire that.
Well, this is interesting because I'm sure as a coach, you don't endorse that type of training that Pietari.
I've never told one of my athletes to go find a mile and just run it all out downhill. That's dangerous. I mean, we'll link to the YouTube video as well, but Kyle went through all the proper safety precautions. He's wearing split shorts with like a 1-inch inseam, no shirt, but he's got gloves on. He's got gloves and sunglasses just in case he eats it at 3:45 mile pace.
Shall we go to our what ifs?
Yeah, we got two great what ifs for
Which one do you want to do first?
For this episode. Let's do the second one. Which I don't know if you know, which the first or second one is, but yeah, let's talk about Magda. My what if for this was just like pretty broad of just what if Magda transitioned to ultra running earlier. Looking at her running career, Magda has had 2 Hall of Fame running careers, one on the roads in track, and then another in ultra running. Like, I think she's done enough on both sides of the sport where like she would be in the road running Hall of Fame and the ultra running Hall of Fame. Like, I firmly believe that. And, Magda didn't switch to trails until what most people would say is like well past your running prime. Clearly, maybe that was the case for Magda, maybe not, but I would say that had she started running ultras 5 years earlier, she definitely wouldn't be worse at ultras. Because her like brief timeline of her progression. So Magda ran her first ultra in December of 2013, and that was the North Face 50-mile champs. And then, So that's basically the very end of 2013. In 2014, she ran 6 ultras, I think between 50K and 50 mile. 6 races, 2014, that's good learning. That's year 1. Year 2 is 2015. She wins Western States. So like she went from having been at she ran at the Olympic trials in 2016. And then, tried it for a couple more years before deciding to switch to trails, and then basically went 18-month learning curve to winning Western States. That's amazing.
Yeah. One of the first things that I think of is, what happens obviously is she enters the sport earlier, and I think she must have missed it by 2 or 3 years, but you just said that she went from 0 to 100, winning Western States 18 months into her time here. And like, how does she fare in 2012 Western States, for example? That famously cool year when Tim Olson set a course record, Ellie Greenwood set a course record that hasn't been touched. hasn't even been come close to being touched. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Close, but hasn't been touched. Like, what does a younger Magda do with the opportunity to race in those conditions that year at Western with someone of Ellie's caliber, obviously pushing her throughout? Like, can she go under 16, for example?
Yeah, I know. And I'm definitely not saying Magda was automatically going to win 2012 Western States. That's like, I don't think anyone was beating Ellie Greenwood that day. But what if Ellie didn't win by like 2 hours or whatever it was? What if there was someone running with her for a little bit longer? Yeah, then it's like, yeah, how much further down is the course record? What does Magda take from that race in regards to just like perceived, limits of this course? What if it just pushes the whole needle further? What if more relevant people in the track and road side of things see Magda coming to the trails earlier, crushing it, having a ton of fun? And it's like, what if there's someone out there who's not running anymore? Maybe they just retired from road racing. What if they went and did trails for 4 or 5 years afterwards? Like, who could that have been?
Because yeah, she truly was a superstar on the roads. I mean,
she made the U.S. Olympic team in 2008 in the marathon. Yeah. Like that's she got 5th at the Chicago Marathon. Like Magda's done, she's done, she's had one of the better road and track running careers. Her 5th place in Chicago was in 2010. What if after that she decides, okay, that was amazing, and I made it to the Olympics in 2008, 5th place in Chicago. That's great. I'm going to trails now. Now that's 2 years prior to the magical 2012 Western States year.
I think you just mentioned earlier, but yeah, if a younger Magda enters the sport sort of at the height of her running powers and all of her peers see that, who does she influence to come over with her to trails? Because we just had a guy, Garrett Heath, on the podcast who is running legend. I mean, on the road and the track, absolute legend. He's older now, kind of similar to the way that Magda came over in her late 30s. I think he's 36 or 37, switching to trails. And you wonder, or at least I wonder, what the differential is there. Like, when you leave the sport of road or track at 38 to go to trails, does that have less of an influence than leaving at 30 because, people see you in older age, aging out of events, getting too slow for the 5K or the 10K or whatever, and like trails is like that last destination before full-on retirement. So it's not as influential.
Yeah, I mean, if there is one thing that I've learned in the last few years, it's that, you can run your best 100-miler at 40 or 42 or 43.
Yes.
I think 100 miles is far enough where, it takes more than just speed and running talent, which is why I also don't think anyone from the road and track side of the world can come over to trails and just crush it. Like, I've seen many an argument of like, oh, how much under the Western States course record would Galen Rupp go if he decided to run 100 miles? It's like, maybe that's a what if for another episode, but I'm just like, I don't think he ever breaks the course record. Like, I've watched him run enough times where like, I just don't think he's that kind of runner. Track 100-miler, flat 100-mile, like, okay, that's a different conversation. But like when you actually do throw a little bit of mountain in there, I think it does take a special kind of
It's a huge variable.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I forgot to finish the thought on Garrett, but I actually think that he could have a good career, like a good at least 5 or 6 years in even shorter distance trail stuff. And I don't know what he's going to do above 25K, but man, like people like him just excite me so much. Yeah,
I'm really excited. I mean, he's created a cult-like fan base for him, whether he wanted to or not, just because of how incredible of a gritty cross-country runner he was. He's beaten some of the best runners in the world that, he would have no chance of beating on the track, but you throw a little mud, a little bit of cold wind in there, and he just throttles them. And it's like that person, if they went to trails, I mean, I remember talking about this on long runs in college of like, who should run a trail race? Because that's what we do at a small school in Ashland, Oregon, is already be talking about trails, even though we're in college. And like, Garrett Heath was one of the names that come up, like, oh, if he did a trail race, I think he would be one of the few like superstars in both,
Yeah.
you know, both events of the sport.
So this next one here, I guess I'll get the conversation started. What if Sally McRae never gets her golden ticket in 2014 at Sean O'Brien to go to Western States that summer?
Yeah, so
Interesting. What if?
this one's really cool because at first glance, this doesn't seem like that big of a what if, because you're like, oh, well, if she doesn't get it there, she probably just gets a golden ticket somewhere else because she's really fit. But that's not the angle of this what if. What happened during then was an up and coming like running filmmaker and friend of Sally named Billy Yang was there during that race, and he filmed it, and he made a great video. It's one of his first ones that like really went big, and it's gotten, quite a few views now. That then led to Western Time, which is one of my favorite movies that Billy's made, and it's about Sally's first Western States, and it's absolutely incredible, and anyone who hasn't watched it needs to go watch it. That put him on the map, and the other thing that was a huge boost for this new trail running team. Oh, I'm actually wearing their shirt. Nike Trail. The Nike Trail team was a whole bunch of these like somewhat, newer, almost seemingly like inexperienced trail runners. And then Nike's all of a sudden just like, we're throwing together a super team. And then, that turned into one of the first teams that really did what I feel is like a really good job of their social media presence. Like I can't really remember another trail team prior to them that was like not only at races and doing well, but they had media people. They were making movies. Billy was over there throwing up stuff on their, Instagram pages. They were doing photo shoots. They all had matching kits. And Billy was one of the biggest reasons why that like really blew up. And I don't know if that happens had it not been for Sally getting that first golden ticket at Sean O'Brien, because just what she did that day and then ultimately at Western States made for such a great story.
One thing I'm curious about, maybe you know the details here, but was Sally the anchor of that Nike team? Like, did she get sponsored first and then all the other dominoes fell into place?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. Like, I know all of the signings, like, more or less happened at the same time, like, over the span of, like, say, 6 months. I don't know who was the first one, and did they have any influence in regards to picking or recruiting the next few people. I don't know the exact story behind that, but I mean, when you're making a trail team and they're cool enough where the manager can drive a Nike Trail Winnebago down to Western States, like that's going to turn some heads, and that's fun. That's good for the sport.
And yeah, I mean, you got to imagine that to some extent, the film that Billy made that year of Sally at Western States, that created at least some momentum to go and create, I think the next summer.
2015, yeah.
It was the same summer then.
No, it was the next, was it?
Was it 2015 or 16? No, it was, because Western States was 2014.
Yeah, and then 2015.
Yeah.
It was the next
summer
year.
later, and they get this whole squad, Sally included, and God knows how many ultra runners and trail runners and non-ultra runners that inspired to get over to Chamonix in some capacity and to make UTMB a big deal for Americans. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's been Americans that have been as or more successful at UTMB than that 2015 year when the Nike Trail team went. But from like a social media standpoint, they took it to a whole nother level. In regards to just people watching Billy's UTMB movie and being like, I have never heard of this race, and now I want to do it. I think that is so cool. And going all back to Sally's golden ticket at Sean O'Brien, I don't know if any of that exists if she doesn't do that first golden ticket race there.
So this is interesting. I was just doing some research while you were talking there. did any other Americans do well at UTMB in 2015? And to go back to our first person in this What If series, Magda Boulet got second at the 2015 CCC. I think she was doing a Western States CCC double. So she got first at Western in June. And then 2.5 months later went out to Chamonix and got second at CCC. And she was not a part of that UTMB filming. But you got to also imagine that you were there that summer. And then, of course, they made Life in a Day, which she was a part of another famous Western States film like 2 or 3 years later.
That's actually his most viewed movie.
Most viewed movie. So there's
Life in a Day.
Going on.
I just real quick, I want to recap Magda's 2015 season. It's one of the better ones.
Please do.
Magda's 2015 summer of racing. I didn't realize this until we were looking into this What If. I did not realize how amazing her 2015 year of running was. So it starts out in February of 2015. She does the Sean O'Brien 100K. She wins it. In March, she goes to the Chuckanut 50K and wins it. She does another 50K in the Bay Area, wins it. She does the Canyons 100K in May, wins it. In June, she does the Western States 100 mile, wins it. That's her first 100 mile. And I think the 2 prior 100Ks were her first 100Ks. Then in August, she goes and does CCC and gets second. So it was actually her first loss of the season. But, second at CCC is pretty legit. And there have not been, that might be one of the more successful Western States, like UTMB week races, regardless of distance. I think that's one of the better doubles out there. And then most people would call it a season after that. In September, 1 month later, Magda goes to the Ultra Race of Champions, which was at the time in Auburn. And I actually did that race, and it was awful. It was 105 degrees out and started and finished in Auburn. She wins that too. And then she finally caps the season. But that is so much big racing and big winning in 1 year, in one summer.
Couple questions. Well, actually, maybe one statement first. That is probably the greatest season of any athlete, male or female, in our sport of all time. I just can't imagine that many wins across that many races.
We'll have to take a look. I know Tim Olson had a couple like that were pretty monstrous. Like he did the Courtney as well. Like I know Tim, I'll have to look back on it. We were just talking about it at the running store the other day. He did the UTMB Run Rabbit double, which was in hindsight probably not the greatest idea, but like there's no time between those two races. There's barely enough time to travel across the world to get to the start line of the other one. And he was pretty competitive in both. And I think he did a lot of other races that summer too, but maybe maybe that'll be a future segment for another episode. It's just like some insane seasons that some of the best ultra runners have put out. Whether it's one summer or 1 year of racing. Because that's just something we don't really see that too much anymore. I mean, the first person that comes to mind who's kind of gotten away with that was Courtney Dauwalter. She's been one to line up and really throw down a lot of humongous races over the course of 1 year.
Well, maybe this is a hot take, maybe it isn't, but I actually think it's probably going to be a thing of the past pretty soon.
I think so.
Competitive athletes enter the sport. It's just you're going to have to pick your races more strategically. And this is both to Tim Olson and to Magda. Like I often wonder, how do you race that often and stay healthy over that stretch of time, and just put up good performances? And then B, is it the dominance of Tim Olson and Magda Boulet, or is it like the lack of depth in the sport in that particular era? For them to be able to kind of go in and take care of business, race in, race out.
One thing that their, seasons have in common, they were both relatively new to the sport of ultra running when they did this.
Yes.
Like Tim, when Tim won his first Western States, he had only been running period for 2 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no,
he
it's crazy.
He didn't run in college or anything, right? He was just he just picked it up in his 20s.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I came to Southern Oregon University my freshman year, he was the massage guy that our team would go to if we were beat up or injured because he was really good. And that was so I first met him in 2009, and he was not a runner at that point. Like I knew him as our kind of hippie looking guy who lived in Ashland who did massage really well. That was what he did. And then in 2010 he started running. In 2012 he wins Western States.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's I say we close it out with news here. What is I guess we just had Trans Gran Canaria. We just had Way Too Cool 50K. Any thoughts on either of those two races?
From Way Too Cool. So I was kind of a bummer not to like really know who was running Way Too Cool because their entrance list was in alphabetical order and there was no published elite field. Yeah, but looking at the results, I want to know more about Eli Heming, who got second to Tim Tollefson. Tim ran 3:13. 3:13 is very fast. It's the fourth best all time. I clicked Eli Heming on Ultra Signup, and as far as Ultra Signup goes, this was his first 50K. And Googling his name, it comes up that he is a pretty good triathlete. Is this a permanent switch? Because running 3:16 at Way Too Cool makes me want to tell him you better permanently switch to trail running because you're very good at it. So that's exciting, and Tim Tollefson. This was a stepping stone in regards to his building block for Western States, to be running this fast, with Western States being one of the goal races in mind. That's pretty cool.
I really hope. I know he got top 10, fifth last year, and anybody would be stoked about that. But I do think he considers himself to be in the highest echelon of 100 milers in our sport still. And so I hope he puts it all together and at least gets on that podium. Maybe even gets a win at this year's event. I mean, it's anybody's race with Jim out of it, right?
It's wide open. Yep. As just the previous year of results go, it's Tyler Green's race to lose.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
We had a world record in the 50K on the men's side this past weekend.
One second. I gotta give my buddy, training partner, former roommate Jimmy Elam some props. He went out to Trans Gran Canaria last week, and Dylan Bowman actually had his prediction was Jimmy would podium. I thought the same thing because I just know how strong of a racer he is. I think he got 25th or 24th. It wasn't his day, but going back to our earlier conversation in this episode, he's a finisher. Even when it's not his day, he typically finds a way to at least take care of business and notch a finish, and he did that. So I'm stoked for him. Just wanted to give him a shout out on the pod, and I don't know if he's going to do Canyons 100K in April or what he's got next, but whatever he does in Europe later this year or beyond, watch out because that guy's strong when he's clicking.
Absolutely, yeah. Jimmy's a very, very talented runner for sure, and has been one of the few that's been able to take a whole bunch of track and road speed and translate it to very good trail running.
For those that don't know Jimmy, he's one of those Chico State crushers alongside Tim Tollefson and Anthony Costales, and whatever they do there produces great trail runners.
Yeah, Chico's probably given SOU a run for their money in regards to alum ultra runners, and I'm only saying it in that way and not the other way around because I'm an SOU alum.
So sorry, I interrupted you on the world record. Let's talk about
so we had a world record in the 50K, and here's my hot take. I think within a few years that world record will be at least 5 minutes better.
So what was the world record?
So it was 243, I think, or 242,
for 50K?
And for 50K, and now it's 240 and 13 seconds, which is I think it was 509 pace. But there's a lot of like race grading calculators out there. And I don't know how dialed in they are for 50K, but like if you put in a marathon time and you try and give it the same grade as this 50K, a lot of the calculators rate this 50K about a 2:13 marathon. So the world record got broken, but there's been a lot of people who've run under 2:13. I figured, I mean, I'm sure some of the best marathoners in the world, they could run 5-minute pace for 50K. Like it's only 5 more miles and they're slowing the marathon pace down by 15 seconds a mile.
Yeah.
Increasing the pace to 5 minutes a mile, that knocks 5 minutes off the world record right there. And grades out to about a 2:09 marathon.
Has Kipchoge ever done 50K?
No, but in a recent podcast, he said he would love to, he loves the idea of trying an ultra marathon. And then the follow-up question was like, how far? And he actually said, like, I would even be curious to see what a multi-day race felt like.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know if we'll ever see that, but it is a thought that's crossed his mind. Like, how many miles can Eliud Kipchoge run in 4, 5, 6 days? But he's, I mean, I'm sure if there was enough money on the table, he could crush the 50K world record. And that's not to, that's not to discredit, the current one. Yeah. But, then that got me thinking too of like, is there, I'm sure no one will say yes, or at least at the moment, but is there any benefit for like a world-class marathoner to run a 50K so that way then when they do run a marathon, it's not the longest thing they've ever done? Because that's the case for a lot of shorter races.
Again,
I'm making excuses to create a really competitive and fast 50K. Is like, it's good training for your really fast marathon, because then it'll seem short.
Well, this has been awesome, man. I feel like we covered a bunch of great topics. Again, we got some.
You didn't put it on silent?
I couldn't even find it. We're going to just talk through this. I tried to find it in this backpack over here, and it's a black phone. It's a black backpack.
See, it's too small.
It's like one of those phones in Austin Powers, like
this could be. It's like what Killian has in his bag at UTMB.
Yes, this is a UTMB phone basically.
Yeah.
And, so it has now interrupted us twice, and I won't make this. What is it? Michael Scott says, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice." I can't remember the last part of it, but I'll have to say I'll go get it. Anyway, dude, this has been awesome, man. Like I said, I think we got our various segments of the show locked in, and maybe that new one with greatest seasons of all time. And for any listeners out there that want to hear us talk about other things, let us know. Email Brett, email me. Brett is Brett at trailsandtarmac.com, and I'm Finn at singletrack.run. But also just hit us up on social too. I'll put Brett's stuff in the show notes as well. And we're definitely back for number 3, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And for anyone listening too, like, we're not full set on our, itinerary of events every episode. Like, if we talk about something and like a lot of people email us and they're like, it's actually kind of boring, but I really loved when you talked about this. Like, I want to know about that. Like, I want to make every segment of these episodes exciting and, worthwhile to listen to. And if there's anything new, you're on a run and you're like, oh, this would be a funny ultra running talk show segment. Throw it our way.
Please do. Please do. I mean, one that I'm thinking of, I know we talked about this offline, but I really want to do like an ultra running draft where basically we take like the 8 to 10 most prominent shoe brands in the sport, and we redraft their top 5 male and female athletes, for example, and then like track their progress throughout the season. Something like that would be kind of fun. I think we'll also do a bunch of stuff around like Western states and UTMB as well. So in addition to what we already have going on, there'll be a bunch of episodes that come out around that too. And so know that is in the pipeline.
Yep. The one-day Western States fantasy season.
Yes.
That's coming up.
We can pick our cross-country teams for that.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. So anything else you got before we go?
We checked a lot of boxes today. I think this is a good length. Nice run for most people.
By the way, one thing I do want to, and I'll shamelessly plug this for you. You are one of the best coaches I know in the sport. You coached alongside Ryan Gilfie at Trails and Tarmac, same with David Laney. And I know you love talking with athletes about their training. And I know that there's a lot of folks who listen that would love to talk X's and O's, and maybe there's even a way to work with you. So what's the best way to get in touch for that?
Yeah, I mean, Brett at Trails and Tarmac. That's Brett with two T's. Brett at trailsandtarmac.com. That's my direct email. Just shoot me an email and we can always get things rolling. If not me, definitely the coaching season is picking up. That's for sure. As we head into these spring and summer races, we've got, Trails and Tarmac, we've got a whole crew of coaches that are all, I am the worst runner of all the Trails and Tarmac coaches. And I take so much pride in that. I am the only Trails and Tarmac coach who's never signed any sort of professional contract. And I just think that's so cool to be surrounded by that much knowledge in the sport. And, the coaches aren't just our coaches because they're good at running. I think they're good at running because they're very smart about their approach and what they've learned and how they can apply it to other runners.
Cool. Well, man, I am already scheming for the next one. Maybe we'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks, but at the very least in early April, man. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'll give you at least a couple weeks to find your phone and then figure out how to silence it.
And I'll send you a T9 text.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to it. Well,